Item 6, input from businesses with tobacco permits and presentation on tobacco statistics pertaining to Board of Supervisors file number 190312, health code restricting the sale, manufacture, and distribution of tobacco products, including electronic cigarettes. The ordinance is amending the health code to prohibit the sale by tobacco retail establishments of electronic cigarettes that require but have not received an order from the Food and Drug Administration approving their marketing and prohibiting the sale and distribution to any person in San Francisco of flavored tobacco products and electronic cigarettes that require but have not received an FDA order approving their marketing. Discussion and possible action item.
So, Commissioners, Domenica is going to make her way up to the podium as her first policy presentation to you on the excellent research that she has done.
Live from City Hall.
Oh, great. SFGov TV, I have a PowerPoint presentation. Great. Okay, good evening, Commissioners. Domenica Donovan, Senior Policy Analyst with the Office of Small Business. So today I'm going to go over a legislative review and analysis of Board of Supervisors file number 190312. This is a little different than what our usual procedures are, just provided that this piece of legislation is on a fast track. The Office of Small Business wanted to provide this overview and analysis and provide an opportunity for you to consider it, given that fast track status. So before I begin the presentation, I just wanted to briefly and for the public record offer a reminder that the legal authority that was authorized by the voters in 2003 directs the Small Business Commission to set policies for the city regarding small businesses consistent with and overall objectives established by the mayor and the Board of Supervisors through the adoption of legislation in order to promote the economic health of the small business community in San Francisco, its employees, and its customers. It also requires the Small Business Commission review rules and regulations adopted by the city departments that affect small businesses and recommend modifications that would promote the health of small businesses. In that regard, we have provided this analysis and the following findings. And that language is also in the administrative code. Apologies that I do not have the citation available right now. So with regard to the legislative background, the Federal Food and Drug Administration administers the Family Smoking Prevention and Tobacco Control Act, often referred to as the Tobacco Control Act in the legislation. This law requires that all new tobacco products not on the market before February 15th, 2007 undergo a pre-market review before it enters the marketplace. Notably, this excludes cigarettes. It also excludes cannabis because cannabis is not yet a federally controlled substance. Both cigarettes and cannabis are substances that in the city and county of San Francisco have a 21 plus minimum purchasing age. A new tobacco product may not be marketed per the FDA regulations until it has undergone a pre-market review. This pre-market review allows the FDA to consider whether the marketing of the product is appropriate for the protection of public health. Most, if not all, electronic cigarette products have not undergone FDA pre-market approval, despite having been on the market since 2007. Electronic cigarettes, or e-cigarettes, have since 2007 had a surge in popularity among middle and high school students in the United States. 2017, researchers identified more than 15,500 unique cigarette flavors. Flavored tobacco is highly appealing to youth consumers, and in 2017, San Francisco approved a flavored tobacco ban. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reported that middle and high school students who reported to be current users rose from 3.6 million to 4.9 million students in 2018. In 2017, in the United States, the CDC administered the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. And a result of that survey was that 42.2% of high schoolers reported to have ever used an e-cigarette product. Importantly, in 2017, San Francisco, 25% of high schoolers reported to have ever used an e-cigarette product. That number is down 22% from 2015. And importantly, the minimum age for tobacco purchases was raised to 21 in 2016. So it's likely that that drop was responsive to that raise in the minimum age. The findings of the legislation reference many data points that were retrieved from that youth risk behavior survey. In 2017, 7.1% of high schoolers reported to currently use e-cigarettes at least 1 day per month. Based on the population of San Francisco high schoolers, that accounts for approximately 1,126 students, and that number was reduced by from 13.3% in 2015. Youth who reported to currently use e-cigarettes were also asked if they usually bought the product in a store. Importantly for you all to know, the definition of store in the survey was not defined, though it's alluded to in the legislation that a store would be in the city and county of San Francisco. However, that's not guaranteed to be the case, especially considering our proximity to other localities. So just keep that in mind. In 2017, in the city of San Francisco, 13.1% of students who had reported to be current users of e-cigarettes, so it gets a little wonky, so that's 13.1% of that 1,126 students identified as usually obtaining their products from a store. So that accounts for about 147 possible students. The legislative review that you have, it's indicated that that's approximately 153, but that was an incorrect calculation, so it should read 147. So with regard to the legislative intent, we understand that this piece of legislation was responsive to a national surge in the use of e-cigarettes by youth populations and responsive to some San Francisco youth continuing to access and use e-cigarette products. This piece of legislation would ban the sale or distribution of e-cigarettes that do not have FDA pre-market review assessment in San Francisco by brick and mortar, by mail, and by online retailers. So where youth tobacco use in San Francisco is at a historic low, and where just approximately 3% of San Francisco tobacco retailers were found to have not verified the age of a tobacco purchaser in 2018, this law would mostly impact those of legal purchasing age, that's 21 and over adults, and would have an economically adverse effect on licensed tobacco retailers. And I'll explain how I came to those conclusions in the following slides. So as of December 2018, but really that's April 2019, there were 746 active tobacco retail permits in San Francisco. Approximately 700 of those retailers are considered to be small, independently owned grocers and corner stores, many of which are minority and immigrant owned. Since the implementation of the San Francisco permit density cap in 2015, the number of active tobacco retail permits has been reduced by 23%. Districts 4, 7, and 11 now have fewer than 45 active permits each, and the remaining districts have more than 45 due to many having been grandfathered in under the 2015 law. And just a quick thank you to the San Francisco Department of Public Health for providing that information. So this graph will also illustrate how many tobacco retail permits have been reduced since the implementation of the permit density cap. And to reiterate, the number of active tobacco retail permits have been reduced by 23%, indicating that the permit density cap has had its intended effect of reducing the number of tobacco retail permits in the city of San Francisco. So going back to how I got to the age verification compliance rates, 2 entities are responsible for, the state of California is also responsible, but I have data from the Food and Drug Administration as well as the city and county of San Francisco with regard to tobacco check inspections. Since 2012, the FDA has conducted 222 tobacco check inspections in San Francisco, and of those, only one small and independently owned business was issued a warning letter for failing to verify the purchaser's, it's a very hard word to say, age when they attempted to purchase an e-cigarette product. There were 8 violations observed in total by just 6 businesses who account for less than 1% of tobacco retail permit holders. The San Francisco Department of Public Health reported that in 2018, there were 21 instances by 20 businesses observed where the tobacco retailer did not verify a customer's age. In other words, that's approximately 3% of all tobacco retail permit holders. So I also looked at, and I thought it might be important for you to know, the San Francisco Youth Tobacco and Other Legally Controlled Substance Use. There were a number of data points that were retrieved from the San Francisco Youth Risk Behavior Survey that were discussed in the legislative findings. So I tried to pull together some of them to illustrate for you what tobacco use by youth looks like in the city and county of San Francisco. So in 2017, 16.7% of San Francisco high schoolers tried cigarette smoking. That's 1 or 2 puffs. That's not every day. That's not every month. That's just having ever tried. That number is down from 24.4%, which was reported in 2015. And you can see that in the graph there. The orange indicates San Francisco use, and the blue indicates U.S. numbers. Since 1997, there has been a 71% decrease in the number of youth who are reported to have tried cigarette smoking. That's a pretty dramatic increase over the course of 20 years, and that's likely due to there being approximately 31 rules and regulations that the city and county of San Francisco administers with regard to tobacco control. Nationally, in 2017, 9% of high schoolers reported, as compared to the U.S., San Francisco consistently reports less use than the national average. So the graph that you're looking at here represents those youth who reported current cigarette use, and importantly, current is defined as once per month or more. And again, San Francisco is represented by the orange line. The U.S. is reflected in the blue line. In 2017, 5% of San Francisco high schoolers reported to currently use cigarettes, and that number did not change from 2015, but still it remains under the national average. What you're looking at here reflects electronic cigarette use by San Francisco high schoolers, and I included those who have ever used electronic cigarettes, so that's tantamount to having ever tried regular cigarettes. Those who currently use electronic cigarettes, so that's 1 day or more per month, and those who use e-cigarettes daily. In 2017, 25% of high schoolers reported to have ever used an e-cigarette product. That number is down from 32.2% in 2015. 2017, 7.1% of high schoolers reported to use an electronic cigarette. This is down from 13.1% in 2015. So that's reduced almost by half. Likely, the enormous jump in the enormous decrease is due to the 2016 law, which requires that those aged 21 and over are allowed to purchase tobacco products. With regard to daily e-cigarette use, that number is significantly lower than those who currently or who have ever used electronic cigarettes. With regard to substance use across the board for substances that require a legal purchasing age of 21 or above, youth in San Francisco are reported to currently use alcohol, cannabis, e-cigarettes, and cigarettes. And again, currently is more than 1 day per month. Ever is having ever tried. We thought it was important to highlight the other substances as well, given that in 2015 and 2017 in particular, there were other substances that were much higher in use by youth. The blue bar represents cigarette use. The orange bar represents alcohol use. The gray bar represents cannabis use. And the yellow bar represents e-cigarette use. Since 1997, as you can see, alcohol has reigned as the most frequently tried substance. In 2017, the two substances that youth reported to try with the highest frequency were alcohol and cannabis. With regard to youth reporting current use, for 2015, you can see where the electronic cigarette use is extraordinarily high. That was reduced significantly in 2017. However, alcohol and cannabis were reported at almost double the rate of current use as electronic cigarettes. So possible fiscal impact to licensed tobacco retailers. In the absence of a city-administered economic impact study, we can only rely on self-reports for anticipated revenue losses by licensed tobacco retailers. One example, a corner store owner estimated that he earns $200 per day conservatively from e-cigarette sales. Based on this, we can approximate that a licensed tobacco retailer could stand to lose up to $72,000 per year in sales. Obviously, that's going to depend on the size of the business. But, it's important to also remember that there are approximately 700 small businesses with tobacco retail licenses, all of whom would stand to lose approximately $72,000 per year. With regard to that, and considering the greater economic climate that small businesses are operating in San Francisco and California, California has some of the highest business taxes in the nation. The Small Business Commission reviewed a couple weeks ago the minimum franchise tax exemption, where we discussed the tax climate that small businesses operate within. In addition to that, over the past decade alone, commercial retail rents have skyrocketed in the city, and mostly affected, those small businesses who aren't making competitive revenues to their neighbors. Those small businesses have had to comply with a multitude of new local and state legislative measures, including but not limited to the minimum wage ordinance, plastic litter, toxics reduction law, sugary drinks tax, healthcare security ordinance, the San Francisco bag ban, cigarette litter abatement fee, child care tax, deemed approved use ordinance, and the flavored tobacco ban. While those measures have undoubtedly been in the interest of the greater public good for San Franciscans, their sudden and successive implementation has had an adverse economic impact on the economic health of those small businesses. particularly for grocers and corner store owners, among others. And undeniably, these measures have likely also contributed to small business closures, and have potentially increased the retail vacancy rate as well. E-cigarettes have been sold by grocers and corner stores for at least the past 5 years and likely longer. Those business entities have factored those past sales into their gross receipts and into their projections. To implement this ordinance with a 30-day effective rate would significantly impact many small businesses. So should this legislation pass as written, there will undoubtedly be some small grocer and corner store closures, and this will not only contribute to an increase in retail vacancies, but also potentially job losses. Additionally, crime may rise as well in more vulnerable neighborhoods. According to one study, retail closures were associated with an increase in crime. Those retail establishments generate foot traffic and with later hours provide for additional external lighting, which provides for an added level of public safety. Foot traffic provides for a form of incidental surveillance, which can lead to increased public safety as well. Specifically, when you look at areas with high walk scores, particularly for dense neighborhood commercial areas, you'll see that crime rates are lower than in areas with lower walk scores, which indicate that there are fewer retail outlets in those areas. A citywide e-cigarette ban could also contribute to an increase in illegal transactions involving this product. So we're talking about black market exchanges of electronic cigarette products. Additionally, despite unsubstantiated claims, e-cigarettes have been found to be a critical aid in cigarette smoking cessation among adult users. According to a 2018 National Academy of Sciences study, there is substantial evidence that completely switching from regular use of cigarettes to e-cigarettes results in reduced short-term adverse health outcomes for those users. So where this legislation would most specifically impact adult consumers, it could potentially have the opposite effect of reversing efforts to reduce cigarette smoking on the part of those adults. So with that, I'll also add that there were a couple of other additional observations. Positively, this legislation does close the online loophole, which would potentially limit youth access to e-cigarettes. Right now, we know that there are many opportunities for consumers to purchase e-cigarettes via websites, via mobile applications. And so if amended to include mobile applications, tantamount to third-party distributors, that would close a significant loophole. And that's important due to the fact that of those current e-cigarette smokers who are youth, they're accessing those products online or via other social sources. So that would contribute significantly to closing that, to preventing that. I'll also add that this legislation would not include electronic devices that are used to consume cannabis. Those devices, you can also use them to consume e-cigarette products. So that's just something to note. Whew, that was a lot, so I will welcome any questions.
Commissioner Dwight.
I have a couple of questions. So where does a store get its tobacco retail license? From the city or from the federal
From the
government?
San Francisco Department of Public Health.
Okay, and how much does a permit cost?
It costs approximately $380. It's valued at a lot higher. due to the permit density cap. Because there are so few retail permits that are available, tobacco retailer permits that can be purchased. There's a 45 permit cap per every district.
So the permit goes with the store if it's sold? Is that like a liquor license?
No, it
No?
does not.
Okay, so why is there, how can there be a market for it if it's only administered by the city? You know, I mean, if it's an investment opportunity if I can buy low and sell high. But if in abandoning it, I mean, now if I don't have it, I'm going to lose all this business. But did I buy that license to invest in the license itself the way I might have bought a taxi medallion one day a long time ago? Or because there's a market for those, an open market for those. But this, it sounds to me like there's no open market. You abandon if you give up your license, you can't sell it to someone else. You just give it up and it goes back to the city and they resell it again for $385. Correct?
So with the density cap, the intent of that is no. So except for the 3 districts that have less than 45 tobacco permits, you may be able to apply and receive a new application from the Department of Public Health. For the remaining 9 districts, you are not able to get a new application until the number of tobacco permits falls under 45 in that supervisorial district.
That's fine, but you don't buy it from a current store owner, you buy it from the city. So if there's none available, you can't buy one. If one becomes available because it's abandoned by a store that goes out of business, for example, the city now has it to sell, but they're not going to, they can't sell, there's no arbitrage for them. They have to sell it for what they sell it for, which is $385, right?
What happens when you buy a store?
Well, but if you
I
buy a
think-
store that has one, it doesn't, that's why I asked, does it come with the store, basically?
It's not my understanding that it goes with the store.
Okay, so I'm just trying to get at whether there's a market, because we're going to, we're going to consider a recommendation that the city make a person whole for what they invested in this. Well, if it's $385, that's a different equation than if it's worth $50,000. If there's 746 permits out there that the city would pay $50,000 for to duly compensate them for taking away the privilege of selling tobacco, that's one thing. That's a big number. If it's $385, it's trivial.
Well, can I say that the city does not sell the permit? The city, you can apply and you receive a license to
Okay.
sell. And so unlike, so if we want to use alcohol for an example, there is an absolute limited supply on full alcohol licenses. And so that has increased the value, but that is a value that one business gets to sell to another
Right.
business,
That's why
right?
it's-
And then you register with the Bureau, with the ABC. So because we haven't allowed for the transference of these permits, these tobacco permits can't function in the same
Right.
way that alcohol permits can.
I
I just want to be careful, because even though alcohol has the ABC selling from one business to another has a value, you still have to apply
I understand
for ABC, which is the equivalent of what you apply for the city.
Yeah, but there's a presumption that if a restaurant or a bar already has a liquor license, that if I'm going to become the new owner, that I have a good chance of getting that, and so that's why there's value in that. Here, it sounds like if I abandon it, I abandon it. There's not that same sort of relationship. Just trying to get to that because it affects the economic. So the other side of this equation is the revenue side of the equation. You've presented that the average revenue for every one of these stores is $72,000 a year in these tobacco products that would be banned. And if we multiply 746 times 72,000, that's $54 million a year in tobacco transactions in this county alone. That's a substantial amount of money, I think, for the assessor's office to be getting gross receipts tax on. for one thing. And also, it is that's a huge hit. $72,000 in revenue. That'd be a big hit to any small business.
I spoke to one small store owner who's already taken a $60,000 hit on flavored tobacco being gone.
Because the sales are down?
He can't sell them anymore.
We can't sell. So yeah, I mean,
And he says he's taken a 60 between what he had in his inventory
Yeah.
and sales. He's taken a $60,000 hit.
Right.
That's a big hit for a small corner
course.
store.
I have some underlying questions about that.
Okay, well,
I got my
let's
questions
finish
out of
up.
the
I
way.
want to get back in the order
I'm
here.
good.
Can I clarify your question really quick? This retail density, the tobacco retail density ordinance, not only capped the supervisory district, but it put restrictions on the sale of the license. So although there's no ability to transfer, there is ability to sell, but after the second time, the person who buys it the first time can't sell it again.
Okay.
So to answer your question,
So it has a one-time value.
Yeah.
Transaction value.
You're right.
Commissioner Dooley.
I just wanted to make a quick comment that the delivery system for marijuana does not allow for tobacco. It's, in fact, I would say in the marijuana industry, tobacco is seriously shunned. Every day people come in and want to know, that are from Europe, why they can't mix their tobacco and their cannabis, and we have to say, we don't encourage the use of tobacco, and we certainly do not provide any products that would be useful, because people bring these jewel things in, all these different things, and none of them work.
They're not compatible with
They're not compatible with marijuana.
For every single device?
Every single device that is sold in a dispensary, I mean, I've never actually heard of anybody that has sold anything that would be compatible. They're very different delivery systems, so.
Commissioner Laguana.
First of all, I'd like to say, Dominica, this was a lot of work, and you did an excellent job. So thank you for assembling all of this. It's a lot to digest. It must have been a lot more to do, and it shows, and it's excellent work. So thank you for doing that. I had a couple questions. Source of the data is Department of Health, San Francisco.
San Francisco Department of Health provided the data with regard to tobacco retail permit holders, as well as the inspections that have been conducted by the San Francisco Department of Health. For the rest of the data, I got that from the Centers for Disease Control. That's the data that was referenced in the findings of the legislation.
What's the source of the data of San Francisco specific youth usage?
That's from the Centers for Disease Control, from the Youth Risk Behavior Survey.
Okay. And in the, I guess, so it gets a little confusing here because they break out e-cigarettes separately from tobacco usage. So
right.
it seems to me, looking at this, that there's certainly been a surge, even in San Francisco, in just overall tobacco usage over the past.
There's been, it's consistently, with regard to cigarettes, it's been consistently going down.
Well, right, but it's nicotine at the end of the day. It's the same substance.
But that's not what's measured in the survey, so we can't say nicotine usage has gone up or overall tobacco usage has gone up. The survey specifically asked with regard to cigarettes and e-cigarettes. So you can't make a determination definitively that would say nicotine usage has gone up. That's not possible based on how the survey was written. You can infer it, but you can't definitively say that that's indeed the case.
Are there e-cigarettes that don't have nicotine?
There are, yeah.
Yes.
They're as popular as
Yes.
alcohol that doesn't have alcohol.
Yeah.
Right. So there are varying levels based on the product. I'm sure that there are some industry folks in the audience who can speak more definitively to that. In one particular brand, Juul has been known to have nicotine levels in one packet that far surpasses other products. And they also account for about a third of the market.
So I saw that Juul stopped selling some sort of flavored pod. Was that in response to the legislation that passed last year?
It's likely in response, in part, but it's likely in response also to the FDA. They've been issuing a series of press releases and updated guidance that have been specifically targeting flavored tobacco products and has named Juul as one of the largest providers of those products, and also has named them because of their marketing towards youth.
So when we talk about Juul stopping to sell this product, could these local stores, for instance, that the president mentioned, President Adams, who are seeing a loss of revenue, if Juul's the dominant provider and they stop selling the product, would that, do we have a sense of what's the primary contributing factor of a loss of revenue?
The estimated loss of revenue if they just stop selling Juul as opposed to other products?
No, I'm saying,
or just generally?
didn't you say you had spoken to a business owner who had lost 65?
60 grand, but that was for flavored tobacco.
Well, that they had inventory that now is not sellable because they had made an investment in inventory, which we outlawed, and so they got stuck with. There was no transition. Say, hey, you have an opportunity to deplete your inventory. Just don't buy any more. Got it. They'd loaded up on it, and so they were stuck with it because they couldn't. It was then illegal to sell it.
Okay. Let's talk for a minute about the $200 a day loss. My eyes were sort of drawn to that because it seemed to be a small sample set. It was, I think, one owner.
Yes.
Do we have any?
Yes, we have
larger
others.
sample set?
We have a handful of others. I picked that one in particular because it was the smallest reported. But again, we don't have an economic impact study that's been directed by the city to refer to.
Is there one being planned?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. 200 multiplied by 365 comes out to
72,000.
Actually, I think it comes out to a slightly different number, doesn't it?
I was wondering where that 72,000 came from, and if you 72,000 divided by 365 is $197 a day.
Multiply 250 by 365.
250?
Yes.
Oh, I see. So we're picking the bigger number, even though they said the smaller number.
I'm going to attribute that to sleep loss.
No, it's referencing.
So the small business owner who was quoted, it was an article in the Chronicle. It was $200 to $250 per day, but it was still on the smaller side as compared to other individuals who have reported losses.
That's $70,000 to $90,000 a year. Basically.
Yes. Thank you.
I'd be interested to hear more real data.
I would too.
Yeah, about what the actual economic impact, to Commissioner Dwight's comments and points before. This feels remarkably imprecise. And
to me also.
Yes. Okay. Finally, it does seem, just based on the CDC data, which I'm sort of curious as to how they got to a local sample. Like, I'd be curious as to what the survey was, what the questions were asked, how it was conducted.
I can provide you the entire survey. I can provide you with the number of those who participated in the survey. It's extraordinarily complicated and wonky and nuanced, which I'm sure is being reflected.
I would enjoy reading it, but to that point, it does seem like there was a drop recently in San Francisco, which I think it's fair to attribute to the ban on.
It wouldn't be reflective of the ban. due to the fact that the ban didn't go into effect until 2018. So the 2019 data will best reflect the numbers that could have been potentially impacted by the flavored tobacco ban. Those numbers are most likely due to the increase in the minimum purchasing age to 21 plus.
I'm sorry, that's what I meant to refer to, not to the ban, but to the raising of age. And so essentially what you're saying is regulation worked.
That's right.
Right. So I have a 14-year-old son who's been caught vaping once, much to his dismay. And I interrogated him in advance of this hearing and asked him, what is the source? Where are your friends getting this? And he relayed, and I'm just sharing this for the benefit of my fellow commissioners who may not be as unfortunate to have a young teenager. But he said that they're buying and selling it on social media, and that's where they're getting it, and that it's older kids who get it then from slightly older kids. So it's this like chain of sounds familiar. So I think there is a question for me, and it is a question, I don't know the answer, but what is, presumably there's somebody at the, just above the age threshold. So previously it was 18, so it makes sense that raising it to 21 would dry up the supply for these younger kids, because the conduits down to the 14-year-olds get a little more difficult. But I am curious, and I'm wondering if there's some way to find out whether the source of the 21-year-olds that are buying it, number one, are they going into stores and buying it? I know some feel the answer to that is no, and that may very well be the case, or are they buying it online? Could it be that we could, as part of this legislation, gather some of that data? So I think one thing that would be useful to find out is in a single transaction, I think it's one thing for somebody to come in and buy a single Juul cigarette. It's another thing if they walk into a store and they walk out with 500. I see $200 a day in sales, $72,000 a year out of a single store. Is that a lot? Is that a little? Hard for me to tell. But I would think that the city could ask for the minimum and maximum number of units sold per transaction. So, are we just selling one or two at a time, or are we pushing over whole boxes like it's Costco or something? That seems remarkably, those seem like two very different things. And then we could then get some sort of, I would ask the same thing of those that are selling it online, which seems to be, another possible source for these folks to get it. And I would like to understand, are folks buying 100, 200, 500 of these at a time, or are they just buying enough for their personal use? Seems material, given how these kids are getting it. And it's definitely, from my perspective and what I've seen with my own children, a very serious and real problem, and I'm concerned.
Commissioner Dwight.
Yeah, I'm sort of like, I didn't hear what I expected to hear tonight. I think I heard that there was a spike in trying it and that now it's trailing off. And yet, reading the media, I would be influenced that it's a scourge on our youth throughout the United States. I feel a little bit like I'm in a climate deniers conference here, where some people are saying, "Oh, there's no climate change." Other people are saying, "Oh, of course there is. You can feel it." And my kids are a little bit older, so I'm not dealing with this on the front lines. It's with teenagers; they're in their 20s. But I'm just like this. All this isn't adding up to me. I don't know what's real and what's not right now.
Anecdotally, it's not matching up with reality for my family and what my kids are seeing.
I'd like to clarify that the city and county of San Francisco, and again, I don't work for the San Francisco Department of Health. I know what I know from reading and researching and coming to my own understanding. We have some of the strictest tobacco control laws, not only in the state of California, but also in the country. I think that the CDC local to San Francisco data reflects that. our averages are consistently lower than national averages, no matter what the substance. And I think that that's important to consider. The regulation that we do have has been working. So keeping that in mind, there are also 41 states that sell to 18 to 21-year-olds. And that's outside of the realm of our control. So I think when you're looking at the data and when you're reading the articles and seeing the media, keep that in mind, because the media is referring to national averages. They're not referring to San Francisco data points.
Director Dickens-Reezy.
Thank you, Dominica. I was just about to highlight the fact that the national data is reflecting, and so there is a large youth market out there with 41 states who are able to sell to under 21. I also, just in regards to your comments, Commissioner Laguana, is that also if you look at the chart that Dominica provided in regards to cannabis use is higher than e-cigarette or cigarette use, and so could we and would we want to apply that same sort of concept if you're sort of going down the road of saying, we'll cap the amount of e-cigarettes a consumer can purchase at a retailer, but yet the data shows that the cannabis is a much higher use for youth than cigarettes and e-cigarettes. And so what kind of regulations would we equally apply to the cannabis retail environment? So I want to just sort of keep in mind when we're, keep in mind just as we're starting to really, wanting to really preserve and protect our youth around access, how are we going to apply this law to retailers who sell this particular product in relationship to other products that that youth are getting that we have determined that they should not be consuming? So I just wanted to just highlight that.
I just wanted to say that the amount of security and double, triple checking that cannabis dispensaries are required to do, no one under 21 gets in. That's out. Everyone has to have a valid ID showing that they're of that age or older. And also, there's a cap on any sale. It's right up on the computer screen saying you can only purchase a limited amount of this product on a daily basis, and it flashes a different color like, nope, that person wanted to buy more. So it's highly regulated compared to like e-cigarettes.
Okay. Commissioner Ortiz.
First of all, Dominic, thank you. This was amazing. Very, very thorough. And you're doing an amazing job on your first time presenting, so good job. I just wanted to kind of piggyback on you, Commissioner Laguana, regarding the eye test. Obviously, the nonprofits that I serve in and help or work with are primarily located or help constituency that is in probably the most disenfranchised neighborhoods in San Francisco. So I'm constantly, in these neighborhoods, and I could attest to the eye test of the menthol ban had a direct impact onto the black market. People are selling menthol cigarettes like if it was crack in the 80s in the projects. So the unintended consequences of moving a legitimate business and the taxation that comes with it and disrupting small businesses, because small businesses are having humongous impact, and specifically, I know menthol and they're targeted to minority communities, but it's having a reverse effect beyond of the purview of the Small Business Commission, because with that cash business come crime, et cetera, just like drugs, right? Even in the cannabis industry, with the overtaxation of local and state laws, again, that I've never seen since I was in high school, I'm starting to see people sell weed again on the streets, getting a 10 sack.
Yes.
So what I'm trying to get at is I just want to be mindful because we're playing with a very delicate fabric, which is small businesses. Some of these retailers, the corner stores, they've been serving neighborhoods, especially the disenfranchised neighborhoods, before anybody was interested. You know, I know they sell alcohol and they do sell tobacco, but they also sell perishable goods, you know, some groceries, milk, you know, necessities that otherwise you would have to go in very, what we call food deserts, right? So they are serving those food deserts, and this revenue sometimes augmented them enabling and being able to help the community. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Commissioner Yee Riley.
Just want to thank you for your presentation. I know you put in a lot of time and effort to gather all the information. It's been very helpful for me to understand, know what's going on in this market. So the e-cigarette, thank you.
Commissioner Ligana.
I just wanted to respond in brief to as far as regulating cannabis versus tobacco. Obviously, cannabis isn't in front of us right now. It's the e-cigarettes. But larger point, what I noticed was the combined tobacco e-cigarettes did seem to approximate about the same as cannabis. Number one. Number two. Nicotine is physically addictive, whereas cannabis has not been shown to be physically addictive. So I think from the perspective of, what seems to be driving all of this really is trying to protect youth from starting on this cycle of getting addicted to this stuff, because that's why menthol cigarettes are selling like crack now, because those people were paying attention to the Marlboro Man commercials back in the 70s, or, Camel cigarettes that look like cartoons, and now it's very hard to get to stop. And to that point, just to say that I'm not sort of polemical about this, the cessation smoking aspect is also an important part of this. It is something that's been shown to help people reduce the amount that they're smoking. So I recognize that part of it too. And that's why I think, personally, I feel like there is insufficient data to arrive at, I'm just looking at this and I'm seeing a lot of things that are just missing in terms of being able to make a proper decision. I don't see what the impact is. I don't have any genuine sense of what the impact is to the merchants. We're lacking data about where the kids are actually getting this stuff from. I support, personally, as a father of two kids, I support the legislation. I'd like to see less kids getting addicted to nicotine. It's one of the most addictive substances on the planet. But there's challenges here in terms of what we're given to look at. And I'm also very new to this topic. I knew nothing about e-cigarettes a week ago, so that's where I'm at.
Director Dickens-Reezy.
So just one last thing that I want to make sure that we identify. Just like with the ban on flavored tobacco, and just like this, it does not affect the marketing to that population. So why there's a good black market is because that population is still being advertised to. So the city does have a ban on brick and mortar being able to put up tobacco advertising. Again, these are old laws before online existed. And so I think to your point, getting it from the social media, there's a lot of marketing that is probably happening on the social media. So it's an important, because we're talking about a very small number of individuals, while that's not good, who try and then daily use e-cigarettes or tobacco products, but does that merit, do we need to focus our attention in other places? Also, we did discover through the Department of Public Health's data on the going and doing the enforcement measures that there are a couple businesses that have repeatedly sold to underage through the sting operations. And so again, can we be more targeted to really getting at that small number than doing a blanket ban that is predominantly affecting 21 and over adults?
Can I also offer 2 points of clarification? To your point, Commissioner Ladwana, I did ask a representative from the FDA a question regarding how the survey is administered and whether those who've replied that they either have ever used or currently use cigarettes, and those who replied that they have ever or currently used e-cigarettes, they're not 2 separate camps. So there's likely a lot of overlap between the two. So I think that's just an important point to keep in mind, because knowing how the survey was administered is very important for understanding data points as they get thrown around. We can cherry pick data points for all the days. So that being said, my train of thought is lost on my second point.
Okay, Commissioner Zouzounis.
So let's just move on.
Thank you, Dominica, for collecting all of that data. And I just want to echo what everybody's saying. Insufficient data is part of the problem of why the city hasn't done its due diligence in this process. There's no economic impact report on what the city would be losing. There's certainly no industry data, and that's part of the problem. Merchant groups, we've gotten provided some kind of case study samples from merchants, which we can share, but we don't have data on the cumulative amount of sting operations, but we do know that there is a high compliance rate, and I can say anecdotally that the state and the SFPD partners with multiple third parties, and enforcement and sting operations are nonstop in this industry. So it's highly regulated, as shown from the data with the compliance rate. But yes, the city and the sponsors haven't shown us that local data, which I think would prove that we have the mechanisms already established towards this health goal. I would like to make a motion with how I think
But we need to have public comment first.
Yeah, so I'm going to save the rest of my comments till after that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Just the last thing, because our purview is how this impacts small business. Like me
Correct.
personally, my mom, she passed away from, a lifetime of cigarette smoke. But if the intended consequences was to prevent, youth from starting the habit, the long life of cigarette smoke, we're not doing that, because now in the black market, now there's no ID check, as a corner store owner. Of course I'm not going to sell to underage kids, because I could lose my alcohol license, I could get fined, etc. So I think it's had a reverse effect, and we've disrupted small businesses. So again, our purview here is, how is this really impacting small business? I understand the intended consequences, the intended spirit of the legislation and all that, but I'm out there in the neighborhoods that this is intended. I'm really out there. I was born and raised in these neighborhoods, so it's making it worse, and I would be very, very surprised if this data doesn't spike upward in the near future.
Because it's going to be a while.
So that's it.
Okay, and with that, I'm going to go into public comment right now. So if we have any members of the public, come on up, line up. If you can line up against this wall here, and we'll take public comment on this. Good job. Hang on a minute, let her sit down and get the thing ready.
All right, we're all set.
Okay.
Good evening. My name is Stefan Diduk. I'm with THR Policy, and we educate on the subject of tobacco harm reduction and vapor products in particular. And by the way, for a first presentation, that was actually pretty excellent. We could go into details about FDA regulations and timelines and everything else, and how Supervisor Walton's ordinance is unfolding, but we'll save that for a later date. So I think we all agree minors shouldn't vape, and even though the city's density of minors is far below the national average, the compliance to prevent underage sales by retailers is actually extremely high. I don't think this policy will accomplish any of the stated goals. There are other ways to prevent youth access and use, and we strongly encourage the city to engage in that conversation and work together on more substantial and more successful solutions, because prohibition never works. The proposed prohibition on the sales of all vapor products is nothing short of mind-boggling and contrary to the harm reduction policies that the city has embraced when it comes to other substances. It is nothing short of telling current smokers that they should continue to smoke, as the city denies them access to a life-saving technology, a technology that has worked for millions of Americans. It is also nothing short of telling former smokers who use vapor products successfully that the city prefers that they start buying cigarettes again. I can't imagine the city being proud of unintentional consequences that this policy will cause, including the creation of more of an illicit market and damaging actual efforts towards improving public health. Though I guess increased sales of deadly combustible cigarettes might at least justify the extremely high cigarette littering abatement fees that the city has. I seriously question the city's priorities. I spend a lot of time here and in a lot of areas, and it doesn't take a degree in rocket science to see and often smell the problems that go unaddressed. From homelessness to lack of affordable housing and a deteriorating infrastructure, yet banning legal products that are aimed and marketed at adult smokers is somehow a priority. The city has garnered a reputation of the human feces capital of the nation, yet the priority is denying smokers a safer alternative. Like, you're right, this is not about climate deniers. This is more like being an extra in the movie Idiocracy. Anyway, the policy sends a clear message: keep smoking. And I strongly encourage the city to re-examine its priorities and send this policy straight to where it belongs, the trash can. I certainly hope that this commission agrees with the fact that this is not a policy the city should adopt. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, so I came here just to, I guess, I don't have any statistical data or anything like that, but I just felt it was important enough to let you know my story as someone that does vape. I smoked for 35 years. I started smoking when I was 15 years old, and actually it continued through the military and all the way through. Vaping helped me stop smoking. I have not had a cigarette now over 18 months. And, you know, that wouldn't have happened because, like, I've tried other smoking cessation products, things such as gum, which taste like absolutely awful. The patches don't really work. You perspire a little bit, they start falling off. And, you know, I guess maybe there's the mental thing about having something in your hand. But the vaping did work for me. And if this should pass, I fear that it will deprive those who are smoking that want to stop of a method of stopping that was very effective for myself. And, you know, I mean, I don't think anybody in this room thinks that, you know, the vaping products should be sold to youth. I think we can all agree. And the state has a legal age of 21. But I can't imagine, like, why it would be easier for me to purchase cigarettes where it would be much easier to fall back. It would be much easier for me to purchase alcohol. Given where I work near Civic Center, probably even heroin, to be honest with you, if this ban goes into effect. So I think it's a lot of overkill and hysteria. Somehow it ended up in the news story that wouldn't die. But I think if we can just regulate it, like, say, for example, alcohol, why could that not be enough? A lot of your websites that do sell these products now, they've tightened up quite a bit since the FDA started giving them warnings. Sometimes I've seen, like, posts on Reddit where people are actually of age and can't get it, you know, through mail order because of, you know, maybe they don't have a credit card or something like that. So I think we're heading in the right direction, but if we just go ahead and block it completely, then we leave smokers with the old options that we had before that just are not very effective. And, you know, that's pretty much all I have to say unless anyone has any questions.
Nope.
Oh, and in regard to the zero nicotine, there is zero nicotine vape juice. A lot of people are kind of working their way down the chain, lower amounts of nicotine as we go along. And one last quick thing I wanted to point out.
Thank you. I have to, your 3 minutes.
Okay, just that.
That 3 minutes is up.
Okay.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Christopher Chin. I own a vape shop here in San Francisco, and that's all it is. It's a 100% vape shop. This ordinance will put me out of business 100%. I have no food items to sell. I have nothing else to sell. I am done with. So if this goes through, that $72,000 that you had up there is a drop in the bucket. I was doing that in a month and a half, maybe 2 months at most. My lease, I'm still on the hook for a lease for like a year and a half now. Is the city going to help me get out of that? Because I know the landlord's not going to let me get out of that. What about my tobacco license? You mentioned that before. I pulled up my receipt while we were just talking just now, $397 for a tobacco license. So I may be at the high end of the vapor industry here in the city, but I have been in business for 5 years doing this, and the only reason I'm doing it is because I'm providing a good service to people who want to get off carcinogenic cigarettes. And I've got a clean record. If you look at my record, I've got no sting operations. No one's complained. I don't sell to anyone under 21. I card everyone that comes through. And here's an anecdote that I talked to one of my customers. I said, you're not going to even be able to buy online electronic cigarettes. They're like, what? Yeah, and if you live in San Francisco, you can't have it mailed to you. He goes, well, I live outside the city. I'm just going to buy it in bulk, deliver it to my house, and sell it to my coworkers. So as you can see, they've already thinking about ways around that. The city's losing out on revenue and tax, and they're already getting the stuff into the city. And this is through adults in corporate businesses. And another customer was there, overheard this, and he goes, that's a good idea. So as you can see, banning this stuff is not going to help the city at all. It's actually going to hurt sales and hurt the adults. People are going to have to physically get up, go outside the city, buy this stuff in bulk, and come in. And the city, the ire in the eyes and the vitriol that comes out of their mouth when they hear this, when I tell them this, it's hard to hear. It really is. I really wish you guys can do something about this and push back on the Board of Supervisors, because this is going to put me out of business and many other people out of business. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
They pretty much hit a lot of things I was going to say. My family owns 3 smoke shops, one in the city, and we've gotten hit with so many sting operations, and we've always passed. I got hit with 2 in one day, passed both times. I was very proud of myself. And there's a lot of flavored products out there. There's flavored weed, there's flavored alcohol. I don't understand why it's such a problem with tobacco, especially with e-cigarettes. So many of my customers have quit because of it, and I always suggest it to them, especially my older customers, because they don't want to smoke cigarettes anymore. So I suggest to them, like, here, you get the sensation of smoking, because people who are addicted, they have an oral fixation. They have to have this constant feeling of going into their mouth. And so with e-cigarettes, they have that. And on top of that, e-cigarettes, the 7,000 chemicals that are in cigarettes. In e-cigarettes, it's glycerin, which is cooking oil, and it is, propylene glycerin and vegetable glycerin. Propylene glycerin is the cooking oil. And then nicotine. And I understand nicotine is addictive, but there's a lot of addictive things out there, and I don't understand how. And there's different levels of nicotine. It goes from 24 to 0, and the people who mostly use 0 are my younger customers, who actually just like the sensation of smoking. Yeah, and as far as that number goes, my store in San Francisco alone, that number is way off. I've lost anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 a day. And that's crazy. And a lot of people do say, yeah, I'm going to go buy it from somewhere else and just sell it to my customers, not customers, my coworkers or people on the street. So that's revenue that San Francisco is losing out on. And I mean, on top of that, cigarettes has already got the clean up the butt tax. That already went up by like $40 just within like the last 6 years. So it's like, people are trying to save money. They're stressed out. They need an alternative, especially a lot of them don't end up drinking. And with cigarettes, especially e-cigarettes, it's water vapor that's coming out of your mouth. That water vapor is evaporating into the air. And they've even done like little tests on like YouTube, you could see where the effects of it on the lungs are minimal, very minimal, like and anywhere in your body. It's very minimal. The only bad thing about it is nicotine. But you can think that, you can bring that down. Okay, I'm gonna stop talking.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, Stephen Cornell. I just want to comment on the report that was given. I think it's very significant for this commission. I have been with this commission, one form or another, since its inception, and this is the first time I can ever remember that the commission initiated a report that sitting there looking at how it affects small business and the preservation of business in the city. That's what the commission is supposed to be. And this seems to be the first time that's ever happened, and it seems to be a very good report. So I just want to point that out and say thank you, and thank you to the director.
Thank you. Any other members of the public? No, you already had, I can't let you come up twice, unfortunately. Okay, public comment is closed. So what this is right now is just because the legislation has not come before us yet, this is to make a recommendation.
Well, wanted to have the commission have the opportunity to really hear the data, be able to hear it and digest it. Supervisor Walton does want to present, so we have scheduled it for the 22nd as an action item. We are meeting with him on Wednesday, so if there's any kind of direction you'd like to, work towards, then that's feedback that would be certainly welcomed by me to be able to say that the commission is interested in. It's not necessarily a support for the legislation as you did with the previous two legislations, but to work towards a direction, perhaps.
Okay. Commissioner Zuzounis.
Yeah, given the need for more local data and analysis and the high rate of compliance shown from our data collected here and from business testimony, showing that this isn't a point of retail compliance issue, I would like to make a motion to have the director discuss the work that we've compiled today with Supervisor Walton, the city attorney, and the mayor's office of economic and workforce development, Department of Public Health, and the Youth Commission, and discuss with them the statistical findings and the merchant input, and as sound reasoning to exempt San Francisco tobacco retail permit holders from this ordinance. And I hope that we can agree that it's important, like we've mentioned, to close the loophole with online retailers and third-party delivery systems. And maybe there's a way, we can make some compromises here if we're to propose an exemption for brick and mortar retail holders, license holders, that maybe we expand the police code in regards to tobacco advertising. If we maybe consider even a discussion of adjusting penalties for minor sale to minor violations. I think we need to have a conversation that reflects the data and other mechanisms. So that's my motion.
Okay. Commissioner Dwight with a motion on the table from Commissioner Zuzounis.
Just to understand, so you're suggesting that we direct them to give an exemption to current tobacco retail establishments?
I'm making a motion that our director discuss the data and analysis we've had with as a sound, a sound reasoning for an exemption of brick and mortar.
And can you add an economic impact study on that as well?
I would. That's a great idea, and that warrants both an economic impact report from the controller, but also looking into what an industry economic impact report would look like and who would administer that.
My only question is, giving an exemption to tobacco retail establishments, this legislation, as I understand it, is specifically to prohibit tobacco retail establishments. So basically what you're saying is, take this and throw it away, because that would obviate this legislation, unless I understand differently.
That's
It's actually, I have to appreciate our city attorney and Supervisor Walton, because unlike the flavored tobacco, the definition of sale does include online entities. It does not include maybe third-party entities that might be like an Instacart type of sort of app or delivery who could go and pick up. You might call, the store in Daly City and have it delivered to you.
You don't need to dramatize it for me. I understand what you're saying. So this is brick and mortar, online, and maybe some other modes of commerce. But the proposal would be to give an exemption to brick and mortar establishments, existing brick and mortar establishments. Okay.
And also conduct an economic impacts study.
Well, the main premise of my motion is that I want to direct our staff to have these conversations with the real data, with,
But it's the having the discussion is separate from the recommendation of the legislative recommendation. And my concern is that if you lead with, hey, we want you to discuss this, but our intent is that you are going to basically gut this legislation of one of the primary modes of commerce that they're trying to address, that I don't think you're going to get very far. So I'm just trying to get at making sure that what recommendation we do make leaves it open, that we're asking them to discuss and listen. I mean, that's like saying, come in and say, well, you're grounded, but we need to have a conversation about your behavior. Well, I'm already being signaled that I'm going to get the punishment before I've had the discussion. So
I think we're more asking them to provide the substantive local data that makes their policy case.
Well, I think to kind of bridge between Commissioner Zuzunis, what you're saying, and right, is the commission certainly, it's within your purview for you to say to me, I do want you to specifically go to the supervisor or the city attorney and say, this is the direction that we would like to see the legislation go in, and work towards that. So when it comes back before you on the 22nd, hopefully it will be in the form that we're able to make our case to say we can still meet the policy goals of what this legislation is intended to do, by exempting our brick and mortar licensed tobacco holders from this regulation.
I mean, I am skeptical that prohibition of this form is going to be effective and have the desired outcome, because I think most of it is directed towards youth, and I think that we have other policies that maintain. I mean, prohibiting something that is otherwise legal elsewhere. I mean, it seems to me we don't have a walled garden here. I mean, it seems like a fool's errand to me. However, I want to be sensitive to their objectives, and see, maybe we can get to some place that doesn't have an out-and-out ban in our city, which probably is impractical. So, and has an economic negative impact on small businesses that are selling the product. And as we heard here, I mean, if that's all you do, then you are effectively out of business in 30 days or whatever horizon they give you, and you're stuck with a lease. I mean, there's something that's not quite right about that, right? So I think that there's a lot of policy issues. Well, I think that the data is not very well fleshed out yet, and I think that the policy is not nuanced enough yet to really handle the likely outcomes of doing it as it's laid out here. It's a little too simplistic, I think.
Okay. Wait, we got to go in
So we
order.
have a motion, but.
We have a motion. Commissioner Leguana.
So first, I'd like to say, to the public, if you ever wonder whether you have an impact when you come and speak, you absolutely do. It's really important to hear from you. It changes the analysis. It does. Commissioner Dwight, to your point, which I think is spot on, that in these situations, there's a quip about government. You're either, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. Wait, did I reverse that? Well, regardless, I think we may want to think about what are some middle ground positions, recommendations that could be made. Number one. Number two, I'm strongly in favor of urging the supervisor proposing legislation to gather more data. I simply find this data insufficient to make an educated decision, and that seems like a small ask given the level of what you're asking local businesses to take on. I think it's reasonable that they should assemble a bit more data to make their case. And third, I agree with you. Prohibition generally is.
We've already seen what that happens in our country with prohibition of alcohol. So.
It's not the most effective way to a policy outcome. So I think there's broad agreement about the policy outcome, which is how do we get youth to stop smoking as much. So let's get the data to focus on that. And in terms of the middle ground, I'm thinking, some sort of perhaps announced sunset clause or a cap on, how much you could sell. I mean, there's all sorts of different sort of middle ground proposals you could make that, over a period of a number of years, you can only sell X amount, then it's X minus Y each succeeding year. So you have a chance to plan for things like leases going out and that sort of thing. So shorter steps, smaller steps should be taken, I think.
Okay, Commissioner Dooley.
I just wanted to suggest a friendly amendment that we would say that we urge them to consider other alternatives that would have the same desired effect with it not being such a broad brush.
Yeah, and avoiding the negative impacts on small business.
Okay, so you have a motion, so if you want to repeat your motion.
I'd like to I'd like to have our director discuss the work that's been and data that's been presented here today with Supervisor Walton, the City Attorney, Mayor's Office, DPH, and the Youth Commission, and direct them to collect more data, ask them to collect more data, conduct an economic impact report, collect industry data, whether that requires the city to contract a third party, and engage other alternatives than a blanket ban on our brick and mortar retailers, given that our data shows this is not a point of sale retail compliance issue. And we can put in subcategories of what those alternatives are. I mentioned, expanding the advertising police code governing advertising, potentially looking at more stringent penalties with those who violate the sale to minor, and of course maintaining the online and third-party delivery element of this legislation.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Zazunis to direct the Director of the Office of Small Business to discuss the legislative analysis of Board of Supervisors file number 190312 with Supervisor Walton, the City Attorney, the Youth Commission, San Francisco Department of Public Health, and any other relevant city agencies, and encourage the development of an economic impact analysis reflective of the possible impact that this legislation could have on tobacco retail establishments, and to consider other alternative measures that would meet the same policy goal.
So, yep.
Seconded by Commissioner Dooley. Roll call vote. Commissioner Adams.
Yes.
Commissioner Dooley.
Yes.
Commissioner Dwight.
Yes.
Commissioner Laguana.
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz Cartagena.
Yes.
Commissioner Yee Riley.
Yes.
Commissioner Zazunis.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Great, thank you. Next item, please.